Hello, adventurer. It's good to see you. You have made it to the morning grind.
Welcome, welcome.
It's the live stream at the beginning of the Geekverse, where we talk about all types of topics in geekdom, gaming, and fantasy, with an emphasis on being constructive and creating the things that we want to exist in the world.
It's all on the grind, Sizemore. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
That's exactly right. There are a lot of adventures to be had today. Dungeons to explore and monsters to slay, and who knows what a random encounter might send our way. That's why we have to prepare, so settle in now for the morning grind with your favorite beverage in hand.
Tea? Or maybe something a little stronger. I've got a few bottles of the old Wynyard left.
Whatever you want. Pull up a chair.
Dude.
If you're feeling fancy, how about a cappuccino? Or a frappuccino? Or how about an espresso?
Just tea, thank you.
Sounds good to me, Gandalf. Whatever you want. I'm just glad you're here.
Everyone is welcome. You can just watch if you want. You don't have to worship anything you don't want to worship.
Thank you, Mike. But be forewarned.
Sometimes we get really strange characters around here.
Wait, what's that you say? Why can't you come and be a part of the stream?
My wife would disown me.
Oh no, I bet she'll be fine with it. Come on in.
Am I scared for my safety? No.
What are we supposed to do?
Everybody do the secret handshake.
Secret cultist handshake.
Oh, now do wizards who love each other.
This, my friend, is a science.
I still don't have gifts, but it's fine.
It's all on the grind, son. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
Dude, this would be a sick place to bring the band.
Indeed it would be, Dave. It really would. I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Oh, look, here's someone new.
Is this the cultist meetup?
Yes it is.
Come to hang out? Please accept me. I have nothing else.
Okay, we accept you. Everyone's welcome here.
Brought some snacks.
Well, that makes things even better.
You want some coffee? I don't drink coffee.
You sure? It's cultist coffee.
What makes it cultist coffee?
I'm a cultist and I'm drinking it.
Oh. Then I'll have some.
What exactly is going on here?
I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome, welcome. It's so great to have you. Oh, and look, here comes another stranger.
Can we help you?
Yes, fellow cultists. I could really use some food.
Oh yeah? Welcome. We have donuts.
Oh, it's me. I'm glad I'm here. I'm sure you have a few questions for me, though.
What's your name? Who do you work for? What god do you worship?
Great questions, Rob.
I'm Steve King, and I worship Nyarlathotep.
No, not really. I'm just Heath, and I won't be worshiping anything this morning. But I will be your host. Welcome to the office. We're going to have a great time. I've got my coffee ready, because now it's time for the morning grind.
If you could become a fish, that would be amazing. Then I could command you with my mental fish powers.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Oh, my microphone's way over there. I'll bring it down. Good morning, everyone. How are you this morning? I hope great. Welcome to my home. Welcome to the office. And welcome to the morning grind. Good to see you. It's a Saturday. Every day's the same to me, it seems like. But I was up this morning and been writing for 2.5 hours. Didn't quite make it to 3. I like it. Ideally, I'd be right for 3 hours in the morning before this starts. But got to 2.5 and thinking about a story that I'm going to be able to take to the writing group next Wednesday. I want to be able to put take some really great stuff to the writing group on Wednesday. So getting ready for that. So good morning. Who we got here? BGD, good morning. And Robert, I've got coffee this morning. I did have time to grind some coffee beans, although I'm almost out of coffee beans. Got to get some more and enjoy some coffee this morning. So glad to have you here. I want to take a look at the Fate Horror Toolkit. That's going to be our main topic for today. I want to continue to take a look at that so we can discuss horror and RPGs. I think this will probably wrap it up. But I do want to look at that last... There was at least a couple more sections that I think we wanted to look at. including I was looking at the one for like running horror for children and things, because I play with I do a lot of gaming with my nephews. And what does it have to say about that? And also in the context of storytelling as well. So that's what's going on. What's been going on there. Tomorrow, man, I am even ahead getting ready on the morning grind, because tomorrow morning we're going to be painting up some Hero Quest miniatures live and having basically a community discussion. I've been meaning to talk about the Hasbro layoffs. I've been thinking about that, and people have been sending me information on it. And I've been meaning to think, oh, we should talk about the Hasbro situation here on the morning grind. And then every morning, for some reason, up until today, I've just forgotten about it. So that might actually be a great topic for tomorrow. But we can talk about whatever you want. We can have people on. It'd be like a call-in show. You do have to be a channel member in order to get the link to come on the show. So I'll put that out to the channel members. And we'll work on painting up some Hero Quest miniatures. In the Discord server, I guess I should put a link to the Discord server. But in the Discord server yesterday, I wanted to... I had a few minutes after working, and I was like, I just really want to try out some of this stuff. Painting some of these Hero Quest miniatures that are in the translucent plastic. And I had the idea yesterday on the grind that maybe an ink, but actually I had the idea that maybe a contrast paint would be good to drop over them to just give them some depth, because they really need it, because otherwise you lose so much detail, you just can't see it. So they need some type of something to give them more depth. And so I was trying that out briefly last night. I posted a picture in the Discord server of what that looks like when it was still wet. They've dried this morning, I noticed, as I was sitting down here. And so they lost a little bit of the depth as the contrast paint dried, but I still think that it was a positive experiment. It gives them much more, it gives them, I don't know if much more depth, but more depth and visual interest. So I'm going to try working on those, working with those tomorrow. And also, so don't forget, if you want to paint tomorrow morning, don't forget to prime your miniatures. I've got some of the miniatures that aren't translucent that I need to prime for tomorrow. So that'll be going on tomorrow. I'll be looking forward to talking to everybody. I think that'll be fun, because I don't have time to run dedicated like painting and crafting streams anymore. But that could be integrated into the morning grind, so that seems like fun. So it'll be tomorrow. Then let's see here. Then on Monday, look at this. I'm even going forward, because what I was working on mainly yesterday after the morning grind was I still have this idea about our gaming tavern. And there's a couple of different issues with that still. But I'm still working through them. In fact, I've contacted the customer support that runs the software to see if I can get a couple of things ironed out. Because I still think it's a great idea to have a digital environment where we can come and play games in. And so I was trying to simplify some ideas that we had. And I'm thinking about doing an open house on Monday. So on Monday, we'll just do an open house, because there's the learning the software. There's the learning the software for, moving around the tavern. It's not that complicated. But getting into the I'm calling it the tavern here. This is the coffee shop. Coffee shop tavern, I'll probably say about the same things. Exchange. But the coffee shop where people can play games, and then the tabletop software, and then, of course, the rules for the game. But I'm thinking about, I got Hero Quest ready to go. So that's one of the projects that got to a point and then kind of got stuck. And then I had to move on to some other projects. So I was trying to get this project unstuck. I've been kind of focused on one project at a time. And then let's see, Tuesday, Doug and I on Table Talk on the Table Talk channel. If you want to come over to get this, Doug and I will be talking Star Trek 6 Part 3 on Tuesday night at 7:00 p.m. We're going to be taking our deep dive into Star Trek 6. That is over on the new Table Talk channel, which is doing very well, which is still doing very well. I was just looking at that this morning. We've had 920 views on that channel in the past 48 hours. So that's great. People are liking some of the stuff, the Christmas themed stuff that we talked about, the Christmas story, which makes sense because it's the time of year. So that's all great. So that's what's going on over here in general. Hope you've got all kinds of great things going on. So welcome to everybody. Let's do our morning sacrament, as we call it. We'll do our reading here, and then we will get over to our main topic, talking about fate. I painted those miniatures last night, and then I was trying to get to sleep, but I couldn't quite get to sleep, and I had some more ideas for Hero Quest game style rules, like for modifications and things. I'm looking forward to getting back to that as well. I didn't want to go too deep into that with my mind because I'm trying to work project by project by project in order to get stuff finished and out. But all of a sudden, I had some pretty cool ideas. I really want to play test with my nephews. Okay, so this right here. Oh, everybody got your coffee? So we're going to be doing My Year Turning Pro. Okay, so My Year Turning Pro, this section will be our reading for today. This is from Turning Pro by Stephen Pressfield. But everybody got their favorite beverage with them this morning? I've got Wish's Brew, freshly ground today. So let's take 2 deep breaths, complete inhales, complete exhales. Everybody do it with me. This is the mental health part of the morning. Just focus, and then take a sip of your favorite beverage. So here we go. And sip. All right. Good morning, Zabel. Good morning. All right. My year of turning pro. I was 31. I had saved up $2,700 and moved from New York City to a little town in Northern California. I rented a house behind another house for $105 a month. I had my old Chevy van, my Smith Corona typewriter, and my cat, Mo. Every Monday morning, I walked into the village to the Bank of America and took out $25. That sum lasted me for the next 7 days. I didn't talk to anybody during my first year of turning pro. I didn't hang out. I just worked. I had a book in mind, and I had decided I would finish it or kill myself. I could not run away or even let people down again, nor let myself down again. It was due. This was it. Do or die. I had no TV, no radio, no music, no sex, no sports. I didn't read the newspaper. For breakfast, I had liver and eggs. I was like Rocky. In the early mornings, I'd walk down River Road to my friend Paul Rink's house, which was actually a camper shell mounted on a pickup. Paul was a writer. He had been a friend of Henry Miller's and Big Sur. Paul taught me what books to read and what writers to pay attention to. That was what I did all night. I read all the stuff that you're supposed to read in college but never do, or if you do, you're not paying attention. I read Tolstoy and Dostoevsky and Turgenev. I read Cervantes and Flabeau and Stendhal and Nut Hampson, and I read every American except Faulkner. Okay, good call. Perhaps. I was writing on my ancient Smith Corona, which had a heavy carriage that physically shuddered back and forth as I typed. My cat Mo would curl up on the desk on the left side of the typewriter so that the carriage would pass over his head back and forth as I typed. He didn't seem to mind. When I ran out of money at the end of my time, I went to pick apples in Washington State. That was when I met Dave and Jack. When the season was over, I had cleared $250 after paying rent, gas, and engine repairs. I drove south and got back to work on the book. One day, I typed "The End." That's the moment in the art of war I knew I had beaten resistance. I had finished something. The manuscript didn't find a publisher and shouldn't have. It wasn't good enough. I had to go back to a real job in advertising in New York and save up again and quit again and write another book that didn't find a publisher because it wasn't good enough. Neither were the 9 screenplays I wrote over the next X years. I can't even remember how many before I finally got my first check for $3,500 and promptly went back to writing more screenplays that I also couldn't sell. During that first year, I sometimes thought to myself, Steve, you've got it so lucky now. No distractions. You can focus full time. What are you going to do when life gets complicated again? In the end, it didn't matter. That year made me a pro. It gave me, for the first time in my life, an uninterrupted stretch of month after month that was mine alone and that nobody knew about but me. And I was truly productive, truly facing my demons, and truly working my shit. The year had stuck with me. That year had stuck with me. There we go. All right. Get work done. All right, let's go over to the main topic this morning, which is our horror toolkit. Let me bring this up. They're nice to have when you can get them, although you have to be careful. like I found out. I feel like I've been working here, but I haven't gotten enough done. On the other hand, it's often surprising how little work you can get done. like he's talking about spending all the year like that, and it's something that's not even publishable. That's the way I feel. All right, the horror toolkit. So we talked about we're all going to die. The high cost of living. The high cost of living. Yeah, I think that's what we were. Yeah, okay. I believe we were going to take a look at this one too. So let's see what Chapter 6 is. The high cost of living campaign frameworks for survival games. The framework provided in this chapter is to help you run games where the PCs face danger from an overwhelming threat and their continued survival is a result of caution, preparation, resource management, and cleverness rather than repeated application of physical violence. This framework combines well with the Doom mechanics from Chapter 5, We Are All Going to Die, but works equally well if you leave the PC's fate entirely in their own hands. At the beginning of the game, the PCs are accompanied by NPC survivors, some of which are close friends and family members created by the players, and the rest are less significant NPCs. The PCs have to manage resources needed by the survivors and handle conflict arising as a result of prejudice, incompatible moral codes, and differences of opinion on what's best for the group. So resource management, that's kind of why I wanted to look at this one, because I was actually trying to think when I was thinking about rules yesterday. What resources, what's supposed to be random, I think is important. What is supposed to be random, and what resources are you supposed to manage? To me, for the kind of game, for like an adventure style game, those are two important things. And it can't be, to me, it can't be too much that's random, and there also can't be too many resources to manage. Because you're supposed to be, you've only got so much mental energy here. And, we talked about that at the writers group on Wednesday, which I hadn't really thought about. It was talking about reading level for books, which I hadn't really thought about. This was Drake's writing workshop, which, by the way, the Table Talk link is still active on if anyone wants to join. Hey, Charlie. It was talking about just lower reading levels are better because of just information processing capability. You're trying to create this whole fantasy world in somebody's mind. So, yeah, we can write at a college level. I mean, I have no problem with that. I have no problem reading at a college level. But if you're trying to process like an entire world and action scene and stuff like that, the college level reading level can actually inhibit your ability to do that, because you can only process that world as fast as you can read. And so it's easier to, if the writing is easier, it's easier to process, because there's a lot of other stuff your mind is supposed to be doing. So can they maintain their humanity as the group of survivors is whittled down one by one until only they remain? And then when they're all that's left, is there anything they won't do to survive? Media inspiration for this kind of genre include Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, The Stand, 28 Days Later, Alien and Aliens, Mist, World War Z, The Fireman, The Girl with All the Gifts, Arachnophobia. General notes and major rule changes. The PCs and group of NPCs they have fallen in with are collectively referred to as survivors in this framework. Sounds like Zombicide. Oh, Sable Phoenix says, Schnee talks about that in one of his best Arcane videos. He calls it the mental cup and how you can't put too much in your cup without it breaking. He talks about how Arcane fits so much meaning in by layering references. Every character is the same, at least at least one other character, save for one or two crucial details, and every scene refers to something important in some previous scene, so that when you hit that character or scene, you immediately refer to something you already know previously. You make connections with increased depth without overloading your cup. Oh, I'm going to have to read that one or watch that one. Brianna sent me some video on Arcane the other day, and I haven't gotten to see it yet. PCs have no stress and must absorb any hits with consequences. But can kill or maim an NPC instead. Survivors can't recover from consequences or sticky or lasting conditions without invoking medical supplies or a similar consumable or situation aspect. Game creation. Choose the consumables your group will be tracking and decide how many free invokes on each consumable the group has as the game begins. As a group, decide how many supporting and nameless NPC survivors are with you. A larger group requires more consumables, but provides more characters to sacrifice on the altar of your own survival. A good starting point is to use 3 times the number of players as your pool of supporting and nameless survivors. A third of these are supporting NPCs. As a group, give each of them a high concept and a treble. The remainder survivors are nameless NPCs. They act as background color and cannon fodder. So for now, just write down how many of them there are. If your game has 5 players, there are 15 supporting and nameless NPC survivors, of which 5 are supporting NPCs and 10 are nameless NPCs. The systems for doomed horror work particularly well in this framework. As a group, decide whether you're using the Doom issue, the Doom clock, failure with style, and/or the Book of Scars. Character creation. In addition to their PCs, each player makes a main NPC survivor. Okay, this is from, he calls it Arcane's Great Layering Techniques or some such. Okay, I bet it will. I'll look for it after I watch this thing Brianna sent. The player initially chooses the NPC's high concept and trouble and their peak skill or approach. The rest of their traits can be filled out during gameplay. One of each PC's aspect must include their relationship with the main NPC they created. At least 2 of each PC's aspects must create tension between them and other PCs or main NPCs. Nick's character is natural-born leader, while Sarah has nobody bosses me around. Using aspects for relationships between the PCs is something that Fate Core does. During play, we present here 3 systems that neatly fit together to evoke the tropes of survival horror. These characters must manage survival resources, watch NPC survivors die one by one around them, and build and maintain safe havens to protect themselves from the threat that assails them. Not enough resources to go around. Consumables. Consumables are aspects that define the resources your group needs to survive. During game creation, pick 3 to 5 to keep track of according to the scenario. A zombie story might use food supplies, ammunition, and medical supplies, while a Mad Max story might focus on water, ammunition, and fuel. Consumables can be invoked normally during the game, for example, by bartering ammunition for favors for other survivors. So I like this. That's what I was thinking about, the 3 main things you're trying to track, which may or may not include something like hit points. Like in this case, this said in this particular style, you're not using stress, but that's something you would also have to manage. Or if you're casting spells with mana points or something like that. Good morning, Zero the Blade. Good morning. Consumables can be invoked. Okay, so 1 or more of the consumables is a necessity for survival. For example, food, supplies, and a zombie story. Each survivor, including NPCs, must periodically burn a free invoke on each necessity just to stay healthy. Survivors can't invoke necessities with fate points to survive. The rate at which necessities are consumed depends on the game's pace. If your zombie scenario plays out over a few days, survivors must invoke food supplies at the main meal time each day. If the scenario spans months, survivors might have to invoke it every Sunday instead. You can also have 2 necessities with different consumption rates. For example, food supplies must be invoked monthly, but water supplies weekly. Consumable rules summary. Consumables are aspects used to track resources needed by the survivors. Each game has 3 to 5, 2 or more of which is a necessity like food or water. Free invokes on consumables can be used to help the survivors and can be gained by scavenging, trade, etc. Every survivor must spend a free invoke on each necessity periodically. Water might be once a day, food once a week, and so on. If a survivor is called on to invoke a necessity and can't, they must decrease an appropriate skill, usually physique, by 1 or take consequences. If 2 survivors are on half rations, they use 1 invoke on the ration necessity between them, but gain a situation aspect representing their privation. A survivor who has reduced skills or taken consequences. A survivor who has reduced skills or taken consequences from going without a necessity can use an extra free invoke on the consumable to recover a point in the skill, or if the skill is back to normal, to begin recovering a consequence taken from privation. So decide how many free invokes each consumable has when the game begins. The player can add more invokes during the game. Fewer invokes, especially on a necessity, increases the pressure on the survivors. If you want the game to have a desperate feel from the start, give them free invokes on necessities equal to the number of survivors or fewer, making things scarce. If you want the game to start a bit more relaxed and get tenser over time, give them invokes on necessities equal to twice the number of survivors. Using physical objects to represent necessities, which I am a fan of. For example, pretend plastic food to serve as food or band-aids to represent medical supplies is a great way of giving players a constant reminder of how few resources they have. I really like that because, like I said, if you're only tracking a few things, make sure those few things matter. And then if you can physically have those things there at the table, that makes it even better. So I'm a fan of that. Like, even like, of course, I like cards. We've been talking about how I like cards. A lot of us like cards around here, so cards could do that. But also, I have someplace I've started putting together like a little tackle box full of different types of meeples just for that purpose. So, like, here's what you got. Keep these things in mind. They're physical things you have to hand over. Don't try to manage 20 different resources. Going without. When a survivor goes without using a free invoke on a necessity, they can either reduce their physique. I was just thinking about that. You know, Hero Quest, you write stuff down. But I was trying to think if there could be. I really like the dashboards, like a player character dashboard, like Zombicide has. I mean, they're more complicated to make. You have to mold them. But I was trying to think about. But maybe there's some way that you could use wells, like, you know, as in like a you know, like a little bowl, a little well in that survivor, in that character dashboard, to either put things in or take things out of. So you can look at those wells. I'm thinking about using a count up system for things like damage. So you'd be adding damage to your character. So consumables and shorter games. If your game is designed to take place over a single night or in-game time or less, such as when you're telling a story about a serial killer stalking college kids one fateful evening, tracking 3 consumables is unnecessary. Just pick one, like medical supplies, that's sure to become relevant in a short term amount of in-game time. Yeah, if you're delving in a dungeon, food might not matter. If it's supposed to be like a day in a dungeon or something. If it's a long dungeon, that would be something else. But if it's explore these ruins, might not need food. Food would need to get you there. Going without. When a survivor goes without using a free invoke on a necessity, they can either reduce their physique or forceful, if using approaches, by 1 to a minimum of terrible -2 to save the player from having to rearrange their skill pyramid. The skill stays where it is on their character sheet, but is treated as a lower value for all purposes. Take a consequence. If they can't do either, they're taken out. Reducing different skills or approaches. You might decide that it makes more sense to reduce a different skill or approach when the survivors run short of a necessity. For example, if they run short of scent blocking cream in a zombie game, it reduces their stealth or sneaky as their enticing smell becomes easier for the zombies to notice. Half rations. Some or all of the survivors can go on half rations to eke out a necessity. Every 2 survivors are on half rations. On half rations, use 1 free invoke between them. However, anyone on half rations gains a negative situation aspect. The group's food supplies. Let's see. Take a note over here. And hey, please do hit the like this morning. It's Saturday. But there may be people who are just chilling here on Saturday, maybe with some coffee, would like to join us. So hitting the like button, I'd really appreciate. Let's see. So if you're on half rations, the group's food supplies necessity has 11 free invokes. They need 14 to feed all the survivors, so they're short by 3. The group puts the 6 nameless NPCs. Oh, yeah, so that's the nameless NPCs also have to be doing this. So you can make them go on short rations. Got you. They need 14 to feed all the survivors, so they're short by 3. The group puts the 6 nameless NPCs on half rations, meaning they only use 3 free invokes, and now there's enough food to go around. The nameless NPCs get a desperately hungry aspect that Elsa writes down, planning to compel it later to inspire a revolt of the starving against the well-fed. Yeah, make those NPCs go on half rations. It's not very gallant of the PCs. Recovering from lack of necessities. When a survivor is called upon to invoke a necessity, they can use a second free invoke to recover their physique or forceful by 1. If their physique is at normal rating, they can instead use a second free invoke to immediately begin the recovery of a consequence taken due to lack of necessity. Survivors can't use more than 1 additional free invoke on a necessity this way. Using consumables. Consumables are normally situation aspects and can be invoked on any appropriate roll. If you have a surplus of food, you can stock up to help you with a feat of physical endurance, or you can trade supplies of ammunition or water with a rival faction to aid you in a negotiation. You can also spend a fate point to invoke a consumable if you narrate how you use it to your advantage without consuming it. For example, using food to lure some rivals into a trap. So anytime it's invoked, it's consumed, unless you're using a fate point to explain. That's why you can't just use a fate point for it. I got you. Gaining free invokes on consumables. PCs can create an advantage to add free invokes to a consumable as long as they can justify how. Be strict on this. It will kill the tension if the survivors can easily add to their resources. You can award any number of free invokes on one of the more consumables because the PCs discovering supplies through exploration or making deals with other factions during the course of the game. If you don't want to spend a lot of time on finding supplies, you can instead use a special type of contest to quickly resolve a scavenging expedition. First, determine the threat faced by the players on their mission. The usual rules for playing the opposition on page 222 of the Fate core system apply. In exchange for the contest, the threat attacks one or more of the PCs rather than competing for victories, and the players roll against passive opposition guided on how far they're going and how many consumables are available to the target. Opposition increases on successful scavenging expeditions as PCs deplete nearby resources and must go further afield. PCs can stop at any time or keep going to accrue more victories. Without 3 victories, the scavenging expedition fails, and they can't take any consumables back. Otherwise, they can distribute 2 free invokes among appropriate consumables for each victory achieved. So this is using a contest system against passive opposition about how easy it is to scavenge for them in the area. So the PCs can order a group of NPCs to go and scavenge resources on their behalf, but at a cost. Roll a single attack against the NPCs, while one of the players gets to defend. Each shift the GM gets kills a nameless NPC or deals a consequence to a supporting or main NPC. If there are any NPCs left, they return home with 1 free invoke for each NPC sent on the mission to be put on a consumable of the player's choice. So in this, NPCs are resources. Your NPCs are actually a resource to manage, which can be fun, I guess. You know, I'm thinking about, we really have not looked at Kingdom Death here on the grind, have we? For some reason, I'm also thinking about Kingdom Death. I've got it sitting here. One reason we might not have looked at it is because it's like buried under everything, all these other games here on the shelf. But I do want to look at Kingdom Death. And we've never actually looked at Advanced Hero Quest. I've looked at Advanced Hero Quest before I was doing the live streams, but Advanced Hero Quest I'd like to look at as well. But the Survivor kind of thing, I'm thinking, I know that's an element of Kingdom Death. Has anybody played that one? I know you've got your tribe. So I like this idea in this type of game about your NPCs potentially being a resource. You know, if you could like promote an NPC from this nameless version up to the named version, and then if you died, your PC dies, one of the nameless PCs, or excuse me, one of the named PCs you can adopt as your own character. I wonder, you could do something like that. So also the NPCs might be kind of like your lives if things don't go well. So whittling down the survivors. In a typical survivor horror story, at best only a few people survive. The following system is designed to evoke this experience by ensuring the PCs are the last survivors. Okay, so in this case, you're ensuring the PCs are the last survivors and not having them be adopted. Adopted as a PC, generating tension and drama through the death and maiming of the PC's allies. Because your character has no stress boxes, which is ordinarily how you absorb damage, the only way to avoid being taken out is to take consequences or to sacrifice an NPC survivor to take out the hit for you. The NPC doesn't have to be in the same scene. For example, if you're out scavenging for supplies and be bitten by a zombie, your boyfriend back at the mall can still take the hit for you. When you get back, you discover he's been bitten by an undead infant that managed to crawl into the base. An NPC's ability to absorb harm on your behalf depends on their significance and your relationship to them. Oh, that's interesting. Sable Phoenix says, Kingdom Death is a little rich for my blood, but makes sense given the quality. Might have to be careful with it on stream. I don't have firsthand experience with it, but no, the art is infamous, as in it's often not safe for work. That's true. I've heard that, yes. I'll flip through it before it's on stream. NPC Survivor Consequence Summary. Instead of their PC taking a mild consequence, okay, so the mild consequence, instead of a mild consequence, a player can severely maim an NPC, effectively an extreme consequence from which they'll never heal. Have a supporting NPC take an extreme consequence. Have a main NPC with whom the PC shares a positive relationship take a moderate consequence. Okay, so the further it is from you, so a nameless NPC gets an extreme consequence. A supporting NPC takes an extreme consequence. But severely maim means it's effectively an extreme consequence, but they'll never recover from it. So you might be able to recover from the extreme consequence. Have a main NPC who you have a positive relationship take a moderate consequence. So the closer it is to you, the less consequential it has to be, except for it's more consequential because you actually have a relationship with that person. The people you don't have relationships with, you have to do something terrible to. Instead of their PC taking a moderate consequence, of course, this does require a lot more thinking too. All right, I took this. Okay, so now I'm going to distribute this to someone in one of these three different ways, depending on what you get. Let's see. Instead of a PC taking a moderate consequence, a player can have a nameless NPC die horribly. Have a supporting NPC with whom the PC shares a positive relationship take an extreme consequence. Have a main NPC with whom the PC shares a positive relationship aspect take a severe consequence. Instead of their PC taking a severe consequence, a player can have a supporting NPC with whom the PC shares a positive relationship die horribly. Have a main NPC with whom the PC shares a positive relationship take an extreme consequence. Main NPC. Have a supporting NPC. Have a main NPC. Have an extreme consequence. Instead of the PC taking an extreme consequence, a player can have a main NPC with whom the PC shares a positive relationship die horribly or permanently become an enemy to the group. Nameless NPCs. I was also thinking that we've never really looked at Twilight Imperium. The big boxes are down below other stuff on the game, but I was thinking about Twilight Imperium this morning. I've really enjoyed playing that game, but I don't think we've ever looked at it on the channel at all. Nameless NPCs. These folks are doomed to a short lifespan once the horror begins. Their purpose is to demonstrate the danger of the situation and to be a drain on consumables while adding a bit of drama to the game. You can have a nameless NPC suffer a nigh mortal wound, severe maiming, zombie infection, or catastrophe of similar magnitude, effectively an extreme consequence from which they can never recover, to avoid a mild consequence. Having a nameless NPC die gruesomely lets you avoid taking a moderate consequence. Also, like if you had like followers, I can see in some type of game if you had like followers and henchmen with you in a dungeon that you could like, how much do we care about this guy? Ooh, what's going to happen to me? Ooh, that sounds pretty bad. I tell you what, the torchbearer back here, let's have him have something really bad happen to him. Supporting NPCs. These characters are given enough characterization they will cause a minor downbeat in the story if one of them is killed or maimed. So, so we've got nameless, minor, and main. I think I didn't pick up there were 3 levels of NPCs. Nameless NPCs, supporting NPCs, and main NPCs. I think that was confusing when I was that then. Yes, every hireling who dies means less treasure you can lug out of the dungeon. You know, that's true. That would be a consequence too. That would be a consequence of that. Supporting NPCs. These characters are given enough characterization that it will cause a minor downbeat in the story if one of them is killed or maimed. You can have a supporting NPC take an extreme consequence to avoid a mild consequence. If you or the NPCs have an aspect describing a positive relationship, you can take an extreme consequence to avoid a moderate consequence, or have them die or otherwise be permanently removed from the game to avoid a severe consequence. When a supporting NPC dies, at the next minor milestone, promote a nameless NPC to a supporting NPC. Main NPCs. Each main NPC is treated exactly like a player character. They're important secondary protagonists and will cause a major downbeat in the story if one of them is killed or maimed. A main NPC can only take consequences for you if you have a significant, important relationship with the NPC as described by one or more character aspects. So you can't do something terrible to somebody that you hate. That doesn't work. Or, who you have an antagonistic relationship with. You can only do this with people who you have a good relationship with. A main NPC can take a consequence for you to avoid a consequence one less severe. That is, you can have a main NPC take an extreme consequence so that you avoid a severe consequence, and so on. To help you avoid a consequence is one less severe. So you have to step up the consequence of that, step up the level of the consequence to go out to a main NPC. You can also have a main NPC die horribly or become a permanent enemy, descending into violent insanity, becoming a zombie, etc., to avoid an extreme consequence. If another PC has a character aspect relating to them to the main NPC that you are sacrificing, they may reject your sacrifice by giving you a fate point. If they do this, you must find another way to absorb the damage. Oh, so if somebody else has a positive relationship to them, they could stop that from happening. But you still, by giving you a fate point, but you've got to find out some other way to take care of that damage. Maybe that antagonistic relationship is very influential in your character's behavior for one reason or another. It could be. Well, it could be. It could certainly be. But it does say here that, so you can't take out your antagonist by doing this. Because you've got to have, well, this says, if you have, no, actually, this says if you have a significant, important relationship. That doesn't say positive. I thought someplace it said positive. Oh, this says this now. This up here does. Supporting NPC specifically says positive. This just says significant, important relationship. This says if you or the NPC have an aspect describing a positive relationship, you can have them take an extreme consequence to avoid a moderate consequence. Okay, so that doesn't. That does not say positive. When a main PC dies or permanently becomes an enemy, at the next major milestone, promote a supporting NPC to a main NPC and a nameless NPC to a supporting NPC. Managing safe havens. We described in Chapter 2, The Raveled Sleeve of Care, how the tension in a horror story follows a pattern like a heartbeat, with peaks and lulls. In a survival horror game, when danger is all around, there needs to be somewhere reasonably safe where these lulls can occur, but it mustn't ever be too safe. Designing a safe haven. A PC might start out in a haven when the game begins, or you might have to find one in play. Designing one is the same either way. Choose a double-edged aspect that defines the haven. The mall is well stocked, and thus a target for desperate, potentially violent survivors. It's also a juicy target for the zombie horde. So the group chooses Smart Brains Shop at the mall. Choose an aspect that describes the haven's biggest drawback and vulnerability. Once a safe drive along the highway from the city, it's now difficult to get to the mall to the city and vice versa. In the middle of nowhere works well to reflect its isolated nature. Given a haven and a defend skill, which reflects how well protected it is against external threats, a military barracks with razor wire fences and trenches around the perimeter has superb defend, while a trailer park has an average defend. Give the haven a defend skill. Okay. The mall has toughened glass doors and frontages with security grills. It's out of the way and has good line of sight to the surroundings, so the group decides its defend is good, +3. The haven has no stress, but has mild, moderate, and severe consequence slots. If it's taken out, the haven is destroyed or becomes overrun, and the group must flee to find another haven. Draw up a quick map of the haven and divide it into zones. This will come in handy if the haven is threatened. Attacks on a haven. The survivor's haven can be attacked at any time. Often this will be during a calm moment. It can also ratchet up the tension if an attack comes right out in the middle of another crisis. Use the full conflict scene to resolve the attack if the survivors notice the attack coming and mobilize to intercept the attackers outside the haven. Someone or something lets the attackers into the haven. The haven has unrepaired consequence, giving the attackers a point of ingress. The haven is breached in the initial attack. Optional, see below. Otherwise, attacks are resolved with the following abstract system. Come up with a single aspect to describe the attacking force and give it an attack skill. An attack equal to or lower than the defender's defend should be easily rebuffed, while an attack that's 2 or more higher may result in a consequence or 2. A school bus on its way to safety at the mall hits a zombie that bursts through the windshield. Soon the passengers are turned. The resulting undead football team starts shambling toward the mall in search of food. The GM, Elsa, decides they have a fair +2 attack. Roll the attack skill of the threat. You can invoke any relevant aspects with free invokes or your fate points for the scene. The players pick someone to roll defend for the haven. As a group, they can use free invokes from consumables such as ammunition to help fend off the attack. Each PC can use a fate point or free invoke to invoke one other aspect to aid in the defense of the haven. If they succeed with style, the haven is unharmed and they gain a free invoke on an aspect of their choice. This can be consumable if they can justify it. If they succeed, the haven is unarmed. I like this chapter because it's got more detail and actually in crunch as to how to run a game like this than it seemed like some of the other ones did. Although we did have like clocks and things like that in the other chapters, but I'm liking this. I mean, you could also, using like havens or something, talk about like Rivendell hiding from orcs or, other havens in fantasy games. If they succeed, the haven is unarmed. If they tie, the haven is harmed, but you add an additional fate point to the GM's pool for the next scene. No, excuse me. If they tie, the haven is unharmed, but you add an additional fate point to the GM's pool for the next scene. If they fail, the haven takes a hit equal to the attacker's shifts. The PCs must absorb this with the haven's consequences or be sacrificing NPCs using the rules on page 100. The haven's defensive perimeter has been breached. So the survivors must absorb this with the haven's consequences or by sacrificing those NPCs. The haven's defensive perimeter has been breached, and it's time to zoom in on the action as the survivors deal with the situation. Run the rest of the scene as a conflict or contests. If zombies breach the perimeter, they need to find and kill them. Or maybe some of their consumables are destroyed, leading to a need for a scavenging trip. So let's say, when the undead football team attacks the mall, Elsa rolls +++- for a total attack of great, because we said the football team has a +2 to attack. The players nominate Nick to roll for the defense, and he gets -0/0 or blank for a total defend of average +1. Jennifer recently established regular security patrols, so she uses her free invoke on that to get the group to good, +3. Phil's character is a cop 1 day away from retirement, which he explains means he spent hours on the target range, making it easy for him to pick zombies off with his service revolver. He invokes this aspect with a fate point, taking the group's result up to superb +5. That beats Elsa's result by a shift, so the zombie jocks are defeated without the Haven being harmed. Quick resolution of battle here. Haven consequences can't be fully repaired. PCs have to make an overcome roll to change one into something less bad for defense. A gaping hole becomes a boarded up hole, but there's no fighting off the inevitable slide into entropy. Eventually, the group will run out of survivors and their Haven will fail. Example survivor campaigns. Here are 3 survival campaigns which you can adapt to your own purposes or use inspiration when you're going through the game creation with your group. Zombie apocalypse. The current issue, the dead walk the earth. Pending issue, the living are more dangerous than the dead. Consumables, food, necessary, daily invokes required, medical supplies, and ammunition. Wilderness slasher. Current issues, the Appalachian Stalker is picking us off one by one. Pending issue, the middle of nowhere. Consumables, warmth. Necessity, hourly invokes required, representing firewood, hand warmers, gasoline, and other materials that can be used to generate heat and fend off frostbite and other effects of the cold. Phone charge can be used for light, play music for morale, call up help if they can reach a cell phone mast high on the peak, and also a first aid kit. Active post-apocalyptic wasteland. Current issue, drier than dry land. Pending issues, mutants are getting ornery. Consumables, juice, water, necessary, invokes daily require. Meds, bang bang stuff, and gas. There's our gasoline. Cool. I like that one. I like that chapter. That chapter's got a lot of cool ideas in it for a variety of things, I think. Again, I tend to, in general, like the way Fate is trying to approach a narrative game. Robert says, this sounds like an interesting way to think about a Walking Dead style of game. Yeah, I agree. I'm glad we went through that chapter. I think it shows you what Fate can do in this. Without having to track like building hit points and anything like that, or the damage a building takes and things like that. What are we focusing on? So spooky fun. I do want to look at spooky fun here. Let's see about spooky fun. Might actually have to go into another day. But let's see. Spooky fun. Campaign framework for horror games aimed at young people. What is this? If you thought vampire hunting was scary, try 7th grade gym class. Welcome to Spooky Fun. In this chapter, we'll give you a toolkit for writing horror-style games in the style of fiction and shows like Goosebumps, Scooby-Doo, and Nancy Drew. This material is aimed at younger players in the 8 to 14 age range, but older players may have fun with some of these tools as well. The characters in a game focused on spooky fun are children of roughly middle school age. We've written the rules with the assumption the GM is a little older. The aim of this framework is to give you the tools to run games in the vein of such classics of children's horror such as Goosebumps, Are You Afraid of the Dark, Scooby-Doo, Gotham Academy, Nancy Drew, Super 8, the Lewis Barnevelt series, I don't know that one, The Goonies, Stranger Things, Monster Squad, and Hocus Pocus. Although monsters in horror are based on standard tropes, they may still have twists to make them unique. For example, in Bunnicula, the menace is a vampire who also happens to be a bunny. Spooky Fun lets the players contribute twists. See Twistcraft on page 136. Sable says, I don't care for Fate mechanically, but this book has a few good system-agnostic ideas. Yes. Robert says, although there's always something jarring about gritty reality survivalism, especially nowadays, one wonders if such a reality isn't right around the corner. I've never read Bunnicula. I remember it being around, though. Let's see. Children's horror. The element at the core of children's horror is the same thing that makes adult horror scary, taking the familiar and making it unfamiliar. Fear of the unknown is a universal theme in horror, and you can use it to great effect regardless of the age range for the participants. Despite this universal theme, there are conventions in children's horror that clearly distinguish it from horror aimed at older audiences. A primary one is the handling of violence. There are rarely depictions of violence or injuries in children's horror, much less death, and certainly not where it happens to the protagonist or any of their close allies. Nor does children's horror explore the sorts of existential crises that often feature in adult horror. Children's horror does feature distrust and incredulity from authorities because of the protagonist's youth, but typically this is resolved at or before the climax of the story, when adults finally realize how bright and capable the young protagonists are. The fear in children's stories tend to be more immediate and localized. A menace of some sort shows up early on and threatens the protagonists or their loved ones. This menace is frequently a traditional type of monster, such as a mummy, vampire, ghost, or werewolf, and leaves telltale clues that point to its nature. The protagonists reach out for help, but being kids, naturally no one believes them. Horror thrives on powerlessness, and this is easier to do in children's horror because they don't have access to the tools that will let them fight off the menace. Instead, they must rely on their wits and camaraderie to triumph. Empowerment. Horror presents great opportunities for empowering children to confront their own fears. This is particularly true in a group game setting where children can work together and talk about what's scaring them and then vanquish it. This is an important part of spooky fun. The children must be able to handle whatever menace is presented to them and shouldn't ultimately be saved by adults or other forces. And that's also difficult to do, or something to be remembered, and also difficult to do in fiction. Whose story is it? It's their story. So they need to be able to solve the problem for themselves. But the issue is, how do you do that without seeming stupid? Because if the kids can handle it, why can't the adults handle it? And how big a threat is it if the kids can handle it? I'm dealing with that a lot. Not necessarily in horror, but even in fantasy or when you're overcoming a bad guy. Because you can do the same thing if you're trying to do like a, fantasy adventure story. All of a sudden the children are saved by the adults. And if it's the children, if the protagonist is a kid, then it has to be that kid's story. No, Robert also remembers Banicular. In fact, adults in children's horror are frequently depicted as incompetent or unaware of what's really going on. Yes. They aren't able to relate to the children, nor do they believe them. Kids play the role of the defenders, breaking the rules that are supposed to keep them safe in service of fighting a grave threat. As with horror for adults, the menaces may be metaphors. For example, they could be twists on the perils of social media, dealing with hostile cliques at school, or having trouble with a particular teacher. Any of these can give a spooky sheen and be used to explore topics that are personal and meaningful to children. Fun. Your spooky, fun game must be fun. The best way to achieve this is to discuss up front what sorts of scary stories everyone likes. Is there a particular kind they like more? The monster stories of Goosebumps, or maybe the mystery of Scooby-Doo? Aspects on page 126 discusses the use of a nightmare for other characters. This is a very important tool in both setting boundaries and figuring out what each player wants to see. Setting expectations is a big part of any game, but particularly one that's designed to scare the players. So meddling kids, classic trope, character creation. And the characters in Spooky Fun are kids dedicated to thwarting menaces and monsters. As mentioned in What Is This? This game is geared toward players aged 8 to 14, and their characters are in a similar age range. The protagonist must navigate the awkward landscape of middle school while also dealing with menacing terrors. The characters in Spooky Fun stories are created a bit like the ones in Fate Accelerated. However, there's some pretty big differences, which we'll tell you about in this section. Characters in Spooky Fun have three aspects: high concept, nightmare, and click, which is fleshed out during character creation. The youngest players may find it difficult to come up with good aspects, so ask leading questions to get the creative juices flowing. You may also give them suggestions to guide their process. High concept functions in the same way as does Fate Accelerated. What's their deal? Are they an introverted bookworm or a sassy track star? The high concept should suggest a niche for their character. Nightmare. This aspect lets the players highlight what their character is afraid of. It gives the players some control over what they want to see in the game. Are they afraid of concrete things like snakes or spiders? or something more abstract like looking stupid or not sticking up for my friends. Discuss with players how the nightmare would look during the game. Make sure they choose something they're comfortable with. This is something for the character, not the player. This is something that the character, not the player, should be afraid of. Their nightmares will come up in the game, so make sure all of the players are comfortable with each character's nightmare. If one player can't deal with clowns, and let's be honest, who really can, that's a bad nightmare for anyone to choose. Good point. This is something they want the character to be dealing with, being afraid, not necessarily them. Sable says, the best children's horror game I know of is Monsters and Other Childish Things. I don't know that one. But Sable says, it does so well at putting you back in the mindset of a young child. Well, I might have to check it out then. Monsters and Other Childish Things. Click. Remember how junior high school was? Yeah, it's painfully socially stratified and fractured. This aspect highlights what group of characters runs in, like the JMS drill team or the Kevin Baker's D&D group. It's also fine being a lone wolf, but highlighting how groups treat each other lets other players play through experiences and situations that are familiar to them. Having to approach different groups for favors and help makes a fun role-playing opportunity. All right. I think we should stop right there. So this goes into report cards. This is going to, remember, report cards is where we are. We'll come back to this in a few days. Tomorrow, we'll be painting and having a group discussion. So I hope everybody will be here for that. We can talk about whatever, but we can also talk about D&D and the Hasbro layoff situation. And then on Monday, I hope I will have the coffee shop ready to go. So we'll take a look at this. Sable says, go ahead and make it something the players are afraid of. What better way to confront your actual fears than facing it in an RPG where it can't hurt you? Exposure therapy by proxy with a heads up to the player beforehand, of course. If that's what they want to do, I say go for it. But don't expose the kid to trauma. All right. Well, everybody, I got things to do. I know you do too. Let's go forward today. Be creative, be constructive, and grind on. I will see you tomorrow. Later, everybody.